My girlfriend's best friend humiliated me in my own living room. She demanded I apologize or we were over. I just smiled. I said, "Done," and served them the coldest lesson of their lives. My name is Michael. I'm 32, and I'm a forensic accountant in Austin, Texas. Think of me as a blend between a financial detective and an executioner in the courtroom. When a company manipulates its accounts or a spouse hides assets during a divorce, I'm the man who finds every loophole, every hidden number, and presents it in such a way that even the dirtiest of fraudsters can't escape. My specialty is asset tracing and financial reconstruction. I've uncovered everything from Ponzi schemes to divorce frauds, helping my clients recover millions in stolen fortunes. This job demands patience, precision, and absolute attention to detail. Nothing is assumed. Everything is documented, and the evidence always tells the story. 4 years ago, I bought a 1960s ranch house in East Austin for $180,000. Most people would have run at the sight of it, but I saw a gold mine. That area was growing fast, and the house, although neglected, had a solid structure. I invested $47,000 in 3 years of personal effort. I replaced the electrical wiring, modernized the plumbing, demolished and rebuilt the kitchen, restored the hardwood floors, installed a new HVAC system, completely renovated the main bathroom, and learned to lay tile through trial and error. It took countless nights after long 12-hour days, hand sanding trim. The garage was converted into my workshop, fully equipped with a table saw, miter saw, and a complete electrical system for serious work. In the end, what was once a ruin was transformed into a 300,000+ home, a true sanctuary that felt like a fortress built with my own hands. That's when Sophia entered my life. I met her at a networking event for the UT Business School, about a year after finishing the renovations. She was 28, in her first year of her MBA, sharp, ambitious, and hungry for success. She had worked 3 years in marketing after college, but realized she needed more to achieve her goals, so she was betting on herself in grad school. I respected that determination. The chemistry was immediate. She understood my analytical mind, and I was drawn to her ambition. Our conversations had substance, revolving around real goals, values, and objectives, not trivialities. Her specialization was finance, and she claimed she wanted to understand how wealth creation truly worked. One day, she confessed that student debt was suffocating her, and she was considering working part-time, even though she knew it would ruin her academic performance. I then made a decision that seemed logical at the time. Focus on your studies, I'll take care of the rest. That's how I started covering the payments directly at the UT financial office. $52,000 a year in tuition and fees. It wasn't a small amount, but I made a good income, and I believed we were building a future together. An investment in her future was an investment in ours. Or so I thought. 8 months later, her old 2003 sedan started showing signs of death. It was burning oil, the transmission was failing, and the repair cost $2,800, more than the car was worth. Instead of throwing money at a dying car, I took her to a Honda dealership, and we picked out a certified 2019 Accord with only 28,000 miles, leather, and an advanced safety package. The total cost, $16,200. The title was put in my name and the insurance on my policy for convenience. She promised, "I'll pay you back when I graduate and get a good job." I believed her, though. To be honest, I didn't care. I thought that's how a couple worked. They solved problems together. When her lease ended, moving in together was the natural next step. She contributed what she could, about $600 a month for groceries and utilities, while I handled the mortgage, taxes, insurance, and the majority of expenses. I even opened a joint account for shared expenses that I funded with $3,800 every month. In retrospect, I should have seen the signs. Within a few months, everything in her speech was ours. Our house, our car, our guest bathroom renovation. The problem was that I provided 100% of the money and the labor. She, however, presented it to her friends as the result of our joint effort. She talked about how successful we were, how we planned our financial future, when everything came from my Excel spreadsheets and my 60-hour work weeks. But I wasn't bothered. My nature is to observe patterns before making judgments. You collect data, you analyze, and you wait for people to show you who they really are. What I never imagined was that Sophia's best friend would be the one to give me all the evidence I needed to open my eyes. His name was Marcus, and he would end up teaching me the difference between investing in someone and simply allowing yourself to be used. Marcus Davidson. Just writing his name still makes my jaw clench. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt initially. He had been her inseparable friend since college, the one who supposedly supported her through a dramatic breakup with an ex-musician during her senior year. According to Sophia, he was the hero who restored her confidence and convinced her she deserved better. He called himself a creative director and brand photographer. His online portfolio was full of moody coffee shop photos and only 3 actual clients. He drove a 2007 BMW convertible that spent more time in the shop than on the road. He rented a $1,400 a month studio in South Austin and always seemed to be between major projects. The first red flag came the moment Sophia introduced us. Instead of basic courtesy, Marcus evaluated me as if we were rivals. He launched direct questions about my job, my income, and even my future plans with her. He positioned himself as a sort of protective counselor, someone who intended to guide her away from men who, according to him, didn't deserve her. What he lacked in achievement, he made up for in pure brazenness. From the start, I knew something wasn't right. It all started almost imperceptibly. I'd organize a special dinner for Sophia, and in the middle of the conversation, Marcus would find a way to compare my efforts to those of her ex-boyfriend, who, he claimed, prepared meals worthy of a professional chef. I'd plan a weekend getaway to San Antonio, and, as if passingly, Marcus would recall that impromptu trip they took in college to the coast. If I gave her jewelry, he'd joke about how office men showed affection with material things, while creatives did it from the soul. Every one of his observations was designed to present me as the predictable, secure, but boring man, and himself as the guardian of Sophia's true essence. He claimed to have known her longer, understood her better, and valued her authenticity in a way that I, busy securing financial stability, could never achieve. The most painful part was watching her absorb every word. Although she enjoyed the comfort I provided, Marcus dedicated himself to insinuating that this comfort was stealing her spirit. He sowed doubts with phrases like, "You seem different lately," "I miss the old Sophia," or, "Are you sure this is what you want long-term?" Julia, her maid of honor, was the other shadow in the equation. Convinced her role was to back up any of Sophia's complaints, she fueled dissatisfaction instead of curbing it. If Sophia said I worked too much, Julia confirmed it without hesitation. If Marcus launched a sarcastic critique about my corporate mindset, she nodded as if she'd heard an absolute truth. Between the two of them, they transformed normal relationship issues into supposed signs of an insurmountable incompatibility that only they seemed capable of diagnosing. What really began to infuriate me was Marcus's relationship with my money. His BMW was constantly broken down. Steering, cooling system, transmission, electrical issues. Something new failed every few weeks. And always in the middle of the crisis, he would call Sophia desperate because he couldn't afford the repair and risked losing clients. She, without hesitation, transferred money from our joint account, the one I exclusively funded. $400 here, $600 there, with the promise that he would pay it back as soon as he closed that big project that never materialized. In 10 months, she even covered his rent on several occasions, always with my effort. I was financing the life of this parasite while he dedicated his time to undermining my relationship. The most outrageous part was his attitude. No gratitude, no acknowledgement, just an arrogant expectation that Sophia would solve his problems while he continued to criticize my materialism. Every time I tried to talk to her about his behavior, his economic crises, his derogatory comments, his evident envy of our success, Sophia cut me off with the same answer. "He's like family to me. Michael, he was there for me when my ex destroyed my confidence. That's something you don't forget. Marcus is just protecting me. He's going through a tough time. And successful people help others." She slowly made me feel that my concerns were the insignificant worries of someone incapable of understanding loyalty. The argument would end, nothing would change, and Marcus would continue to drain our account while poisoning Sophia's mind. What he didn't know was that every move, every comment, every emergency was building his own file, and soon, without realizing it, he was going to face a trial. The opportunity arose after closing the biggest case of my career. Harwell Industries had manipulated their accounts for 3 years, hiding nearly $4 million in losses with accounting tricks worthy of a fraud manual. My investigation uncovered the entire operation and allowed for the recovery of $2.8 million in a settlement. It was 6 months of 18-hour days, surviving on coffee, fast food, and pure energy until I became a ghost, focused on building an indestructible case. The decisive finding came when I proved the CFO had created phantom vendors to siphon money while inflating income with false billing. It took me 4 months to track every transaction, cross-reference bank records, and build the timeline that demonstrated the systemic fraud. The company's legal team tried to discredit me in depositions, but numbers don't lie. When you know how to read them, we crush them. My commission was high enough to afford a major celebration. I didn't just want a dinner. I was looking for an event that would mark a before and after in my professional life. I decided to share it with the people who truly mattered. I invited Matthew, my best friend from college who helped me renovate the house, Lucas and David, colleagues from the firm who covered for me during the toughest months of the case, and Isabella and Thomas, a couple friend who understood what it meant to disappear for half a year for work. I also told Sophia to bring anyone she wanted. "This is as much about us as it is about my achievement," I told her. Her face lit up as soon as I mentioned the $2,500 budget. She transformed into a luxury event planner, premium steaks from a high-end butcher, professional floral arrangements, top-shelf liquor. "Michael, this is our moment to show everyone who we are," she said. That phrase made me uncomfortable. For me, it was my professional victory. For her, an opportunity to display social status. The grocery list quickly escalated to $800, specific wines for each course, artisanal bread from a downtown bakery, imported cheeses for appetizers. I watched her plan the evening as if she were a society hostess rather than a partner, celebrating a professional achievement. Still, I agreed. I spent the week organizing everything. Matthew helped with lighting and sound. I designed an impeccable menu, dry-aged cuts of meat, fresh market vegetables, homemade pasta as an appetizer, and a dessert assortment that could feed an army. Fresh flowers in every corner, good music, and a perfect atmosphere for people to feel comfortable and genuinely connect. The night began just as I had imagined. Friends enjoying themselves, spectacular food, genuine laughter. For the first time in many months, I felt I could relax and enjoy what I had worked so hard for. Lucas, always eloquent, was richly detailing some of his best professional anecdotes. Legal battles he had witnessed, the distraught faces of opposing counsel when they encountered evidence that completely destroyed their strategy. His narration kept everyone engaged because he told it with that spark that turns a simple memory into a spectacle. Isabella, on the other hand, was fascinated, scanning every corner of the house. Her eyes shone with surprise and admiration at the renovations she hadn't yet seen, the new finishes, the redesigned spaces, the atmosphere that reflected so much effort and dedication. That mix of voices, laughter, and comments made everything feel complete, like one of those moments that justify so many hours of work and sacrifice. But the harmony began to crack 40 minutes later. The door opened without warning, and Marcus appeared. He didn't bother to knock or apologize for being late. He simply used Sophia's key as if he had a right to what was ours. His entrance brought no joy or energy, but a heavy air of arrogance and condescension. He walked slowly with that calculating gesture of someone who analyzes and evaluates, as if appraising the value of every object, every detail. He didn't acknowledge that this was my celebration and that everyone had come to share my achievement. He went straight to the drink table, where I had set out top-shelf bottles to treat my guests. He took a glass, poured himself a generous drink, and looking around, delivered a comment loaded with venom. Good job, Michael. It shows what you can achieve when you prioritize the right things. The word right sounded like a mockery, as if earning money or achieving stability were little less than a moral defect. I felt my teeth clench as rage tried to break through, but the habit of maintaining composure in hostile environments kept me in my seat. Marcus, true to his role as a false intellectual, started his usual discourse, that litany about the difference between those who create value and those who, according to him, only extract it. He wanted to paint himself as an authentic artist, a misunderstood spirit surrounded by mercenaries who had sold their souls for a steady paycheck at the end of the month. He said it with an air of superiority that provoked immediate rejection. The looks from my friends were clear: annoyance, discomfort, even contempt. But I remained still, aware that the best way to deal with someone like him was not to confront him in the heat of the moment, but to give him enough rope to reveal the misery of his position on his own. As the minutes passed, Marcus took over the space. He spoke louder, interrupted conversations, and positioned himself in the center as if he were an impromptu speaker. He opined on everything: the commercialization of art, how empty financial success was to pursue, and how creative passion was above all other motivation. Some people live driven by the need to create, he said, shaking the glass of liquor that I had bought. Others are just practical. He spat the word practical as if it were a disease, as if choosing stability and building something solid were an unforgivable sin. Matthew watched him with his arms crossed. His gaze was pure reproach. Lucas had already lost patience and made no effort to hide his boredom. David, calculating as always, seemed to be weighing the possibility of throwing him out at any moment. But I remained silent, letting him expose himself more and more, sure that sooner or later he would make a fatal mistake. The breaking point came when Marcus, with his mask of false concern, addressed Sophia directly. He adopted a condescending, almost paternal tone, as if genuinely worried about her. "I just want you to be well, Sophia. And sure, Michael is a great provider. He's stable, reliable, always looking out for you." He paused dramatically, precisely seeking the effect in the room. It was a poisoned compliment, designed to diminish my value. Sophia's reaction was a blow I didn't expect. She didn't interrupt him. She didn't defend me. On the contrary, she nodded as if Marcus's words were truths worthy of reflection. She didn't seem bothered by the disrespect. She seemed rather to be considering whether the man was right. Isabella, indignant, looked at her as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Thomas, confused, alternated his gaze between them and me, unable to understand how Sophia could tolerate such a spectacle. My colleagues from the firm watched me with that mix of discomfort and expectation, typical of those who smell that something is about to explode. Marcus interpreted Sophia's silence as permission to advance even further. He looked me straight in the eye with that smug smile I found unbearable, and delivered what he thought was his final blow. "Let's be honest. We both know she could aspire to someone much better than you." The silence that followed was absolute, heavy, suffocating. The only sound was the air conditioner running. No one was breathing normally. The looks around me were astonishment, as if they had just witnessed a scene of violence. Sophia lowered her gaze, not because she was offended by the disrespect towards me, but because she was uncomfortable with the way Marcus had publicly revealed something she perhaps already thought privately. In her face I perceived, if only for a second, a flash of agreement. Julia, on the other hand, smiled slightly, as if celebrating that someone had said what she was keeping quiet about. That was the instant when everything became crystal clear. Marcus had crossed a line that is unforgivable. He had humiliated me in my own house, at an event I organized, while drinking my liquor and benefiting from my resources. And most seriously, the woman I had been with for 3 years, in whom I had invested over $150,000 and with whom I planned to marry, had not stopped him, had not reprimanded him. She had shown instead discomfort, not because of the lack of respect, but because the words had come to light. It was at that point that the mask of the complacent host vanished. The forensic accountant took over. I calmly set down my cutlery, interlaced my fingers, and looked directly at him. My voice was low, firm, and devoid of all unnecessary emotion, the same tone I used to dismantle a witness in court. Very interesting, Marcus. I'm intrigued by your analysis. Could you clarify what exactly someone much better means? Be specific, please. He didn't expect it. He thought I would shout, lose control, allow myself to be dragged away by anger, but I was treating him for what he was. A fraud. Well, you know, he stammered. Someone more on her intellectual level, someone creative, someone who truly understands her. I see, I replied calmly. And I suppose you're referring to yourself, aren't you? Obviously, no one knows her like I do. It was then that I took my phone out of my pocket and opened my banking app. It was time to present evidence, to expose concrete data before everyone. Perfect. So, you declare yourself the standard of what Sophia deserves. Excellent. Let's review those credentials, but not with emotions, with numbers. The atmosphere tensed even more. All eyes were on me, and I felt it was the exact moment to deploy months of silent preparation. Sophia's MBA tuition at the University of Texas, $52,000 annually for 2 years. That totals $104,000, all paid by me. Her 2019 Honda Accord, purchase price $16,200, title in my name, insurance under my policy, monthly payment, $0. Marcus's face was beginning to lose color, but I was only just beginning. Monthly household expenses over the last 18 months, average $4,200. Mortgage, taxes, utilities, food, maintenance, all covered by my income. Joint account for personal expenses, $3,800 a month. Again, money exclusively contributed by me. And with every piece of data, with every figure, I was stripping him bare in front of everyone, as I had done so many times in my work, with patience, with accuracy, and with irrefutable proof. I paused for an instant, letting the numbers sink into everyone's minds as I switched applications on my phone. Lucas nodded with a look of satisfaction. He knew how to recognize surgical precision in an analysis. Then, addressing the man who had self-proclaimed himself an expert on what Sophia deserved, I threw the question. Tell me, Marcus, how's your investment portfolio looking? What have you contributed to her future lately? He tried to reply with a, that's not, but I raised my hand and interrupted him. I haven't finished presenting evidence. I took a small notebook from my jacket pocket where I had been logging details for months. Yes, I had been taking notes on everything. Matthew, sitting on the sofa, smirked mischievously because he knew exactly what was coming. The forensic accountant was about to apply his own method in the flesh. I opened the notebook to the marked pages and began. Your BMW repairs. They're documented here in Venmo transfers and shared charges from our joint account. March 15th, $420 for the power steering. April 3rd, $380 for the cooling system. May 22nd, $615 for the transmission. July 8th, $290 for electrical diagnostics. And August 19th, $540 for the suspension. A total of $2,245 in repairs to your car, covered with money from my accounts. One of my friends couldn't help but let out a choked laugh before covering it with a cough. Marcus froze as if he'd been slapped, but I wasn't done. Let's continue with your rent emergencies. June $400, August $600, October $450, November $380, December $525. That totals $2,355 in temporary, never repaid loans. I closed the notebook and looked him directly in the eyes. The silence in the room was so intense that you could even hear the slight clink of Isabella's glass against the table. So, clarify something for me, Marcus. Do you really want us to believe that a man who has invested over $150,000 in Sophia's education, career, and quality of life is inferior to another man who has drained $4,600 from her without contributing anything tangible to her future? Have I accurately summarized your position? The expression on his face was that of a witness utterly destroyed in a cross-examination, and that was exactly what had happened. David was trying to hold back a laugh. Thomas shook his head in disbelief, and even Julia looked uncomfortable for the first time all night. But what truly caught my attention was Sophia's reaction. I watched her face shift from one emotion to another until she sprang up from her chair with such violence that the legs scraped the hardwood floor that I had restored. She was trembling, not with anger toward Marcus for disrespecting me in my own home, but toward me for having defended myself with facts. "I can't believe you did this," she spat in a low, venomous voice. "Are you serious? You humiliated him in front of everyone?" I remained seated, calm. "No, Sophia, he humiliated himself. I merely presented documented evidence against his evaluation of our relationship." Her voice rose, cracking into a scream. "This is not a courtroom, Michael. This is supposed to be our house." And her emphasis on our house, as if she had the same right to a place in which she had never invested a single penny, perfectly summarized the root of our problems. She used that "our" while allowing another man to disrespect me under the roof that I supported, drinking liquor that I had bought, enjoying the benefits that I financed. But Sophia was blocked, blinded in her defense of Marcus, as always, though now not a trace of courtesy remained. "Marcus is the only one who truly understands me. You only see me as a spreadsheet. Do you really think you can buy love with money?" The irony was grotesque. She was reproaching me for investing in her growth and stability while protecting the guy who was emptying her pockets. My friends watched the scene with a mix of dread and fascination. Isabella twisted her mouth in disgust. Matthew, sharp as ever, was already recording everything with his phone, and Lucas was observing as if collecting evidence for a future plea. She was now screaming, out of control. "I'm tired of your cold logic, your analysis, your calculating way of treating everything." She turned to the others as if seeking a jury to absolve her of all responsibility. "See what I mean? Everything has to be a transaction for him. Everything has to be noted, filed, categorized as if it were one of his cases." I saw my friends exchange glances. They understood what was happening. Sophia's true face was emerging without masks. Marcus, behind her, seemed uncomfortable but remained firm, satisfied that he had started the fire and let her consume everything with her fury. Then, Sophia decided to play her riskiest card. She straightened her back, made sure everyone was paying attention, and delivered her sentence with the arrogance of someone who has never faced real consequences. "I am fed up with this, Michael. Either you apologize to Marcus right now for what you did, or we are finished." Each word was louder than the last, culminating in a scream that sought to force me into submission. She even smiled, convinced she had delivered her masterstroke. The silence that followed was absolute. And in that instant, I understood everything with brutal clarity. She, in my own house, at my celebration, surrounded by my friends, was demanding that I apologize to the man who had insulted me while living off my financial support. She was so sure of herself, so convinced she was in control that she believed I would yield without hesitation. She believed I needed her more than she needed me. She was completely wrong. The love I once felt for her died at that precise moment. What happened that night was not a simple disagreement or an impulsive outburst, but a full-fledged public execution. There were witnesses who carefully observed every move, and although it appeared to be a discreet breakup, it actually transformed into a cold, calculated act. It wasn't a heated fight or an explosion of emotions. What emerged was a chilling certainty, an absolute clarity about who Sophia truly was and what our relationship had meant from the start. I looked at her, but not with the gaze of a hurt man, but with the distance with which I face hostile witnesses in court. Instead of anger or pain, a calm, almost amused smile appeared on my face. It was the smile of someone who knows the other person has made an irreversible miscalculation. In a serene voice, I dropped the line, "Then, this is where we part ways, darling." I slowly stood up with the calmness of someone who has already made a full decision. I took my glass, turned around, and walked toward the kitchen, leaving her immobile in the middle of the silent dining room. The man she had chosen to defend remained beside her, unable to comprehend that this decision had just changed everything. Behind me, I heard a sharp gasp, like a dry punch in the air, It was the sound of someone receiving a real no for the first time. Sophia was used to everyone, absolutely everyone, giving in to her demands. That moment was the first crack in the world she had built for herself. The scraping of chairs, uncomfortable murmurs, and averted glances filled the room, but I didn't turn around. My mind was already elsewhere, organizing the next phase with surgical precision. Because when a person truly shows you who they are and forces you to choose between submission and self-respect, there is no doubt. Dignity is defended at any cost. She left that night with Marcus, convinced she had thrown down a challenge that would force me to surrender. In her imagination, I would eventually return on my knees with apologies and promises to never question her decisions again. What she didn't know was that all she had done was open the door to a storm she could never control. For 3 weeks, I disappeared from her life. Absolute silence. No calls, no messages, not a single reaction to the voicemails that started in an authoritative tone and ended up turning into desperate pleas. But it wasn't pain that kept me away, nor was it regret. It was concentration, the same millimeter-perfect discipline I apply in my profession. The first weekend, I packed every single one of her belongings. I didn't do it with bitterness or anger. I did it as if closing another file on my desk. Clothes were carefully folded, books categorized, bathroom items, photographs, decorative objects, kitchen appliances. Everything was placed in clearly labeled boxes, stacked in the guest room, and photographed for legal backup. Nothing was left to chance. That Saturday, Matthew came to help me change the locks and update the security codes. I spent $340 in barely 2 hours, and I can say with certainty that it was one of the best investments of my life. While Matthew worked, I made calls that would radically alter Sophia's course. First call, the University Treasury Office. I informed them that for personal reasons, I would no longer cover her tuition. The spring payment, $26,000, was due in just 18 days. They confirmed that if it wasn't covered, she would be automatically withdrawn and would receive an academic hold. Second call, my managing partner at the firm. I explained that a conflict of interest existed and formally requested that Sophia be removed from the summer internship. The 28 per hour position with an option for a permanent contract was reassigned in less than 48 hours. Third call, the bank. I canceled her access as an authorized user on my credit cards. Her cards were immediately deactivated, and there was more. I contacted my lawyer to draft the termination of the cohabitation agreement and clarify the ownership of all shared assets. I wanted official records of every movement, every expense, every investment. Experience had taught me that documentation was a powerful weapon in any potential legal battle. Then I wrote a short message. Return the engagement ring within 10 days. I backed that notice with a certified letter. Finally, I located my Honda, whose title and payments were in my name, parked at Marcus's complex. I had it towed to my driveway. Everything was absolutely legal, impeccably justified. But Sophia was not willing to surrender silently. Starting on the second day, the voicemails began, all saved as evidence. Day 2. Michael, this is ridiculous. You're acting like a child. Call me to solve this like adults. Day 4. You can't steal the car from me. It's mine. I need it. Give it back now. Day 7. Michael, the university called me. They said you canceled the payment. It must be a mistake. Answer me. Day 10. This is insane. You're ruining my life over nothing. Answer me, or I'm coming to your house. Day 12. Please, Michael, I know you love me. We can fix this. Don't destroy 3 years over one argument. Day 16. I'm coming to pick up my stuff. You can't keep them hostage. The pattern was clear and known to me. Denial, anger, and panic. I had seen it 1,000 times in financial scammers caught by irrefutable evidence. Every dollar I invested in Sophia was based on the idea of a shared project. She destroyed that alliance, so the financial support disappeared. Cause and effect. But the real problem was that Sophia had always lived believing that consequences were things that only happened to others. She was about to discover that this was not the case. Exactly 3 weeks after that dinner, my security system notified movement at the front door. I checked the camera. There she was, disheveled, nervous, trying to force the lock with a useless key. She rang the doorbell, again and again. I took my time to open it. I wanted her to understand the full weight of what "it's over" meant. Finally, I opened the door, but I kept the security chain on. I saw her arrive looking a mess. The self-righteous anger she used as a shield had been replaced by desperation and several sleepless nights. However, beneath that exhausted appearance, I could still notice that spark of self-sufficiency that had always defined her gaze. "Michael, we need to talk," she said, her voice broken. "No," I replied firmly. "We have nothing to talk about." She started, as if she hadn't expected me to cut off the conversation so bluntly. I reminded her of the obvious. "You made a decision 3 weeks ago. You gave me an ultimatum. Either I apologize to your friend, or our relationship ended. I chose to end it. Conversation closed." "You can't throw away 3 years over a fight," she tried to justify. "It wasn't a fight, it was an ultimatum, and I accepted it." That's how things are defined when you say, "it's over." I watched as panic began to settle on her face. That feeling that arrives when someone realizes that words are no longer a game or an attempt to get attention, but that the decision is real and final. "And what about the university, the internship, everything we planned together?" she asked with a mix of reproach and pleading. "What about it?" I replied calmly. "Your spring tuition was due 3 days ago. I suppose you and Marcus found another way to finance it, since he's so right for you." The color completely drained from her face. "You didn't pay the tuition? Why would I? You ended our commitment. My investment in your future ended with it." "Michael, you can't do this to me. I am not doing anything to you. What is happening is that I stopped doing things for you. And there's a difference. You decided, and now you face the consequences of that choice. Your things are packed and ready for collection. Coordinate with Matthew. His number is still the same. Do not contact me directly again." At that moment, she completely lost what little composure she had left. She wasn't crying. She was screaming with a fury that filled the air. "This is crazy! You're ruining my life because your ego can't take a hit." I opened the door a little wider. I watched her without flinching. I was interested to see how far she was capable of crumbling. "You think you can erase me from your life just like that? As if 3 years meant nothing? I deserve better than this." "You're right," I said quietly. "You deserve exactly this." That phrase was the spark that made her explode. She began to scream obscenities that echoed throughout the neighborhood. She tried to push me to enter the house, but stumbled when I stepped aside. "This is my house, too. I live here. You can't kick me out." "Did you live here? In the past tense. You never paid for anything. You never owned anything, and you lost your right to be here when you chose Marcus over me." The rage consuming her wasn't sadness. It was the fury of someone who had never been deprived of anything. "I'll sue you. I'll find a lawyer and I'll take everything." I couldn't help but laugh, and that pushed her to the limit. "With what money? You'll sue me because I stopped financing your life after you broke our engagement? Good luck finding a lawyer who will take that case." She made one last attempt to force her way in before giving up and leaving in an Uber. I thought that was the end of it, but I was wrong. For the next 6 weeks, she tried everything. She sent mutual friends to convince me that I was destroying an innocent woman's future. She had Julia call me crying, accusing me of being cruel and vindictive. Even Marcus dared to phone me to say that I was being unreasonable, that Sophia had made a mistake. But she didn't deserve such punishment. She herself showed up at my office twice. Both occasions ended with security escorting her out and official incident reports. Once, she even tried to follow me in the parking lot until I had to call the police. Each escalation hurt her more. With all the evidence accumulated, the restraining order was granted without a problem. And although I thought that was the end, the worst was just beginning, but this time caused solely by her own decisions. Sophia was forced to drop out of the University of Texas just 4 months shy of obtaining her MBA. It turned out that Marcus's photography business couldn't generate $26,000 overnight. The student debt remained intact, over $73,000 accumulated in 2 years, not counting interest. Now she was without a degree, without job prospects in the field that required the MBA, and with a 3-year gap in her professional history. The internship I had arranged for her, which usually ended in job offers of over $95,000 annually, was given to someone else. That candidate was already progressing, building a solid career. She was not. Without income and without options, Sophia had to move in with Marcus, as she couldn't afford a place on her own. She discovered then what it truly means to get everything you think you desire. Sometimes the hidden costs outweigh any illusion. Marcus had always painted himself as the romantic and creative, in contrast to my image as the practical and stable man. What neither of them expected was for economic reality to expose the fragility of that fantasy. In the end, Marcus was trapped with a bitter, resentful woman who blamed him every day for having ruined her future, while simultaneously expecting from him the economic stability he had criticized in others for years. But my matter with Marcus was not over yet. When you are a forensic accountant and you have observed someone draining your accounts for over a year, you start to notice patterns. And believe me, our hero had some quite interesting patterns that I couldn't ignore. All those supposed emergency payments, repairs, and rent always had one thing in common. Marcus demanded cash. He claimed he didn't trust banks and preferred to keep things simple. The reality was different. What he preferred was not to leave a trace in official records. So I did what I do best. I followed the money trail. I discovered that he had been running his photography business completely under the table for years. He had no business license, did not declare taxes, or have any legal structure, only cash payments that did not appear on his tax returns for at least 4 years, which represented substantial unreported income. I documented everything with precision, every cash transaction I could verify, every business expense claimed without having a registered legal entity, every rent payment that demonstrated income greater than what he declared. Then I compiled a complete report and submitted it to both the IRS and the Texas Comptroller's Office. In the process, I also found another irregularity. His lease specified single occupancy, with no guests for more than 14 consecutive nights. Having Sophia permanently installed violated that clause and exposed him to immediate eviction. The interesting thing about someone like Marcus is that he built his entire life on shortcuts and evasion of responsibility. As soon as real consequences appeared, everything fell apart. The IRS audit was the first blow. It turned out that when you have evaded taxes while living well above what you declare, the government takes it personally. Marcus suddenly found himself facing debts for back taxes, penalties, and interest that totaled over $31,000, a figure exceeding his legitimate annual income. The landlord initiated the eviction process for contract violation. Marcus tried to lie his way out, but I had submitted photographic evidence of Sophia's permanent residence. Several of his photography clients received letters from the state investigating his unlicensed operation. The news spread quickly. Hiring Marcus could lead to legal trouble. In just 10 weeks, he lost his apartment, most of his clientele, and was burdened with a tax debt he had no way to pay. Suddenly, supporting an angry, resentful ex-MBA student who constantly reminded him that he had destroyed her future no longer seemed so attractive. He abandoned everything. 2 weeks before the eviction, he disappeared while Sophia was at her new retail job, leaving her with household debts and a note saying he needed space to clear his head. The engagement ring was never voluntarily returned. I filed a lawsuit in small claims court. I obtained a judgment in my favor and managed to garnish his wages to cover the $4,800 for the ring, plus interest. It took me 11 months, but I recovered every last penny. 4 months after settling that debt, an attorney contacted me about a lawsuit Sophia had filed against me for financial abuse and emotional distress. The illusion did not last long. The lawyer dropped the case after reviewing my documentation and the recording of her meltdown at my door. In the end, it became clear that voluntary financial support during a relationship does not create a legal obligation, and you cannot claim distress because someone enforces the consequences that you yourself demanded. Today, according to mutual friends, Sophia works as a store manager and shares an apartment with several people near the highway. She still tells anyone who will listen that I am a controlling monster who manipulated her finances to trap her, and the story was no better for Marcus. He moved back in with his parents in Houston and now works in a corporate portrait studio for $18 an hour. Apparently, he learned to file taxes, avoid giving relationship advice, and think twice before confronting someone who specializes in investigating financial fraud. My friends still remember that dinner, but not just as gossip, but as a kind of warning about what happens when you underestimate the wrong person. For them, it became an example of how someone who appears quiet can have all the tools to lay the cards on the table and make an unexpected move. Some call it poetic justice. Others say it was an inevitable lesson. I see it in a simpler way. It was a reminder that no one is above accountability, and that decisions have consequences, even if they take time to arrive. I didn't need applause or t-shirts with printed slogans. All I wanted was to reclaim my dignity and make it clear that I am not someone who can be manipulated without consequence, and I succeeded.